What is up, everyone? This is Nightmare, and welcome to The Dive, the show where we plunge into the depths of creativity, uncovering the stories, inspirations, and journeys of artists making their mark in the NFT space. Today, we go beneath the surface with Nuclear Samurai, a Melbourne based artist blending photography, AI, and glitch driven visuals. From Baptism's emotive storytelling to the super playful X figures, Nuke fluidly weaves the nuance of Web3 culture while exploring the blurred line between truth, fiction, and imagination. So let's dive in. Nuke, hyped to have you with us here today.
Yeah, thanks. It's great. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, we had some discussion early on with a lot of the excitement when people found you within our community. I know some other people are very intrigued about your persona, and it's cool to see you live here as well. The name Nuclear Samurai, where does that come from?
Yeah, so that was when I started. I started under a bit of a different name, but it didn't really get any traction. So I kind of felt pretty liberal to change it at my will back then in 2022. And when I was started first getting into like AI, I was like really experimenting a lot with like, how to get different things from the prompts because, it was pretty early days then. And
Right.
the term nuclear samurai was just two words that I smashed together to get a specific result, and I really loved the result. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And then I started kind of crafting this like fictional like narrative for it and stuff, and it ended up really informing one of my early series called the Nuclear Samurai Collection, which was like back in 2022. And so it just kind of stuck. It was just these two words that had this kind of like interesting interplay, and later on I would go on to discover that it's a term that was used for something real. So I was like, oh, whoops. Oh, anyway.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because I thought because you do such a good job kind of interweaving different things in your practice, that and different elements that we'll touch on when we have the discussion, that I thought it was with intent. So serendipitous that you ended up on Nuclear Samurai. As a total side note, it's pretty dope. Like I would use it as a call, like a tag in a game or something. So props to you for just having that, come through. Walk us through your background a little bit in art and photography. I know you had a different journey than some other people that are in this space. Would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so for me, I've always loved art. I've always wanted to be an artist. I draw on any surface that I can find. I'm always doodling and stuff, and like all my math books, all the margins were full of drawings. Like, and I would tell myself that it's just in the margin, so you can't be mad at me. But I wasn't doing the work. I was just drawing, and so like I've always wanted to do it. Like it's something that I just enjoy doing. And then, in my 20s, I was like working, like after high school, I went straight into work and stuff because I just had to. And so while I was working, I was still working on like doing like a bit of a digital illustration practice and learning how to do all of that. And I thought I'd get a camera so that I could get better reference photos and understand light better and stuff like that. And thought to myself, oh yeah, I'll just get the camera and take better reference photos and then, level up my drawing that way. And then, I get this DSLR and had no idea how to use it. And I was like, oh my God, I actually don't know how to use this at all. And so I started like watching tutorials and reading books. And then like all of a sudden it kind of took over and it became my whole like life because I was so obsessed with the camera and like, photography. And then I ended up, serendipitously getting made redundant from an office job that I wasn't very good at. And so it gave me this kind of like license to go and explore what I wanted to do with my future. And so I went back to study. I went back to uni and I studied like an art degree. And I like that really kind of opened my mind and it opened up my whole like world and stuff. And so yeah, I really took that time to explore photography and explore taking pictures and stuff in the early days. And I was doing a lot of fashion and portraiture and macro. Those were my main things and stuff. And so really working with like editorial stuff. And basically straight after uni, I walked into a studio job and I was like, yeah, straight into this like studio job. And I worked in a studio for like nearly 10 years before I ended up going full time as an artist last year. And so, yeah, I worked, from the ground up to running a team of six photographers. And, we were doing fashion and product and lifestyles and you name it. And throughout all of that, like I came to really be familiar with the idea of communicating through images and communicating like narrative through images and stuff. And so when it came time to come and explore the crypto space, I was like pretty well geared for this understanding of visual language. And so when I was working with AI and stuff, I was really leaning on a lot of my already existing skills to bring something else out of it and explore these ideas I hadn't been able to explore fully with photography.
You know what's fascinating? I pulled up your Instagram as we're talking about this because it, going back in history, you have a lot of artwork. You don't want to see my old Instagram photos, kind of incriminating and embarrassing. But the interesting thing to me is as I'm scrolling down, right? Because obviously a lot of the recent stuff is, in reference to the work that you were doing in the NFT space. I'm like, where does this end? Where is this not AI and this is photography, right? Because you have such a keen eye for photography that it's really reflective in some of the work that you did and the realism of it. So it's pretty wild to have that perspective, I think, in how you curate what you're doing.
Yeah, and like my first foray with AI was actually back in 2015 with Deep Dream, Google, like the Google Deep Dream, and like that was the one where it made everything really kind of trippy and hallucinogenic and stuff like that. And I really saw a lot of potential there, but like it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. I'm spewing that I missed out on the whole GAN thing. Like I think that would have been really cool to be involved with, but yeah, I think that the idea of AI has always fascinated me, and the idea of the way that it works on, the training data, informing the way that it, turns the noise into like images and stuff. That stuff to me is really fascinating, and I think that that's why when it came time in 2022 for me to start experimenting with it again, I really was like engrossed with it, especially on a conceptual level. Like just the idea of making the images itself was exciting and interesting because there's so much implications there on a conceptual level that are like ripe for exploring. And because it's such an emerging field and emerging technology, I think that there's time and this is a time and place to explore and to create something that is referential to this moment because you know when people look back there, they can go, "Oh, that is in reference to this," or that idea, that concept is about the actual practice as much as it is about just making the image. So, yeah, it was a real interesting time.
Yeah, and I find it endearing. I don't know if you do as well. I don't know if endearing is the right word, but when you look at some of the tooling that was available, and when people were trying to leverage it, and you can see it kind of puts a timestamp on that time of experimentation in AI with early Mid-Journey release versus what
Yeah.
you can do now or whatever. So I think that's pretty cool. And we could talk more about the evolution of the toolkit in a little bit. But before we go too far, you mentioned you were into drawing and you kind of found your way, into photography as a career, and then you kind of found your way back. So two questions. The art interest when you were young, what were some of your early influences or artists or cultural references that kind of shaped your approach and your perspective on your works?
Yeah, so my earliest kind of like artist influence that I could say was like really that's an artist and that had a big impact on me was HR Giga, because my parents had this like they had a lot of CDs because it was the 90s, and they had this CD for Emerson Lake and Palmer, and that had like a HR Giga illustration on the front of it, right? And then it was also they had a lot of Yes albums with like Roger Dean, like surrealism and stuff like that. And so I got to see a lot of art through the CD, that I would look at the CDs and all the little pamphlets in them. I mean, this is like really dating me because kids don't get this experience anymore. But like, I was looking at all the pamphlets in the CDs and seeing the artworks and stuff that was coming with these albums and really kind of, setting the scene for the music that you would listen to. And yeah, so I would say that like Roger Dean, and HR Giga had a big influence on me, but also like a lot of movies had a lot of influence on me as well. I was very much like a kid who watched a lot of movies and stuff like that. And so it was the 90s and you had like the video store and like my parents were kind of pretty Gen X about it. So they were just like, yeah, whatever, do what you want. And so, yeah, I watched like Alien when I was like 8. So, and that movie is pretty scary for like even me as an adult watching it. It's like pretty scary.
Right.
But like, I don't know. I just love that. I love that the thrill of like the unknown and the horror sort of element. So I was really kind of influenced a lot by like sci-fi, horror, and like artist wise. Giga was a big one. And then when I started kind of like, moving into my teenage years and stuff like that, Dali was a big influence as well. Dali, Escher, Picasso, obviously like the pretty mainstreamy ones. But then also moving on from that, like I really became enamored with like Francis Bacon, and Francis Bacon has had a huge influence on me as an artist, because that kind of like level of expressionism is like something that I think you can approach that through other mediums and other styles and stuff like that. He had a really specific way of doing things, and like I don't know, I just really love the work. It always captivates me.
Yeah, I mean that's it all makes sense when I look at your body of work, right? I think you reference other places, Trent Reznor even being
Yeah,
an influence for
huge.
you as well. I love to hear what, like, obviously as a musician, I'm going to Nine Inch Nails on Friday, by the way, for the first
Oh,
time ever. So that
sick.
that should be super dope. Never saw
The
them,
first
but
time ever.
yeah, I've never had
You
the
know,
opportunity to see them live. But taking someone like Trent who's so I guess resourceful, right? Like doing so much himself, and especially the way that he approached things and how that kind of lended to him and then ending up in cinema, actually. Like, so what do you take from someone like that? Like, it's a totally different genre. How does that influence, as an example, like you mentioned David Lynch as well. How does that stuff influence kind of your approach?
yeah, so like Reznor and Lynch are huge influences for me. With Trent Reznor and like Nine Inch Nails, Nine Inch Nails has been one of my favorite bands forever. And there's someone who like whenever they come to Australia, I go and see them. Like it's without question, like I just go. But like the music has this ability to take you to a different place. You know what I mean? And like before he was even doing scores, like because he started scores realistically, he actually started doing scores in the 90s because he did some music for Natural Born Killers and he did some music for The Lost Highway with David Lynch. But like, and he also did the game soundtrack to Quake as well. And so that was kind of like the early forays into like scoring and like ambient kind of music with him. And like there was that would run through the actual music as well. You would see it in like A Warm Place or like the song that he did with Aphex Twin that's on a pretty rare cut on like the Further Down the Spiral. Like he had this ability to create these soundscapes, and you see it a lot in the Fragile 2 disc and stuff like that as well, where these soundscapes have this kind of like really otherworldly quality that can really kind of like bring out a lot of emotions and stuff. And for me, that worked as like a real good catalyst for coming up with ideas that were kind of like a bit deeper under the surface than just kind of like the obvious ideas, you know what I mean? So instead of looking at, oh, what am I thinking about, I'd be like, what am I feeling, and then working from those feelings and bringing them into ideas and making them into something visual. And so like a lot of the time music has a great ability to do that for me. Like especially like Nine Inch Nails, Tool as well. I listen to a lot of Tool, Deftones, but I listen to like a lot of hip hop too. I'm a very eclectic music listener. Um, I don't really have one set style of music that I listen to, but I think that if it has that transcendent quality where you can kind of like see, like you can visualize things while you're listening to it, I think that that's a really important quality to being something that can inspire art. And with David Lynch, he's a big influence because he was a master at producing work that was really intractable. You know what I mean? Because I would come at it and I would think it means this, and you would come at it and you would think it means that, and we would have a big long argument about it. And then you would ask David Lynch to clarify what it means, and he wouldn't do it. He just would not tell you ever what anything meant. And I think that that is something that's really admirable in his ability to give people that space to bring themselves to his work and to leave his own kind of ideas at the door for he obviously has his own opinions about things, but he just doesn't share them. And I think that that's something really that I admire about his work.
Yeah, there's definitely layers. Lost Highway, a favorite of mine. Certainly makes sense when you think of some of the more storytelling based things that you've done. But it's interesting to me. I've heard you talk about some of the more playful stuff like X figures, which we'll talk about in just a moment, even the meme cards, and them having some additional nuance and meaning as well, right? That explores some different things thematically that may not on the surface be there. And so that's there for people to interpret if they get it. And some people, I guess, reacted strongly to, like, for example, in your latest meme card, we'll talk about the people down at the bottom that weren't survivors and what that means. But yeah, so that makes sense, David Lynch. Absolutely. Side note, love that you mentioned the excitement of getting the booklet with your CD or whatever, and going through the artwork and finding hidden messages or whatever. That's definitely something that I miss from shopping for physical for things, right? Whether it's games or music or whatever. So definitely makes sense. How would you? So this is something that I kind of grappled with when trying to get ready for this interview. You have a lot of depth to the stuff that you do, and it looks like it's with a lot of intent, right? Like you're trying some different things for purpose. It kind of pulls all together. If you could encapsulate it for someone, how would you characterize your artistic approach and aesthetic?
I would say that for me, I try not to be anchored to one aesthetic because I am more interested in the concepts behind the art and communicating concepts than I am specifically just communicating an aesthetic. And my reasoning for that is that with if you aim to be the master of it, the king of an aesthetic, you can be dethroned. You know what I mean? If you aim to be, I am the master of this or the king of that, there's always going to be someone who's going to come along and they're going to be better, or you're not going to quite reach the height that you want to. You know what I mean? Unless you're like so dedicated that you can do it only that, then sure, that's great for you. But for me, I can't do that. Like I can't just limit myself to one thing because my mind is very kind of like a lot of ideas happening at once. And so, when I'm fishing for an idea, it's like being in a room full of balloons and trying to just catch one, you know what I mean? And like they're all different. And when I'm catching these ideas and what I'm going to do next, it really has to be what I feel inside is what I want to make. Because the thing is, I want to make something that has feeling in it. And so, like, baptism is a great example of that, where every image in baptism was designed to manipulate your emotions. And the reason why is because it was actually, the concept of it was about creating a fake event, manipulating your emotions with the images, and then making you realize that that's possible with the tools at the time to be able to create photorealistic images that talk about something that never happened and do it in a way that makes you feel like you're there. That was the goal. And like that means that, the aesthetic itself of the work is not exactly what the work is. The actual work of it is the concept of this idea of truth in images and this idea of like purporting something that's not real as being real. And I think that, like, for me, I'm much more interested in what's underneath the surface of the work than I am just with what's on the surface.
Yeah, and makes perfect sense, especially after the discussion on your affinity for Lynch and some of these creatives that have that kind of depth. So really appreciated it, and I enjoyed looking through Baptism, Helium as well. I'd recommend people check that out and learn a little bit more about that work if you want to touch on it before we hop over to X Figures.
So on Helium as well. So with Helium and Baptism, because I really lean a lot on my past as a photographer. Helium, I actually approached from a perspective of party photography, because I actually used to do a lot of event party photography and stuff like that when I was at uni, just to make extra dollars and stuff. So I went to a lot of parties, took a lot of photos of a lot of people. And so when I approached creating the images there, the story of Helium is one that's about identity, and it's about being within a group of other people and the influences that happen from other people especially when you're young, you know what I mean? And it was about this idea of youth and the fragility of it when in the context of this social kind of pressure. And that's why all of the balloons, they're all kind of symbolic of different things. And so creating that work was really informed a lot by my experience as an event photographer. And then with Baptism, that was approached from the perspective of a photojournalist. And so that was a lot informed by war photography and like, the kind of things you see from events and cataclysms and stuff. And so some of it's surrealistic, like with the animals and stuff like that. But one of the interesting things that I did for it was that I researched what animals are at Central Park Zoo before I put them into the flood. And so the only ones that aren't are the wolves, which I put in for a specific reason. But there are horses in New York, and there is a snow leopard in New York and stuff. And so the idea that the flood could be so bad that the animals escape from the zoo, it's not too unrealistic. It's surrealistic, but it's not unrealistic. And so, um, yeah, it's something that I think is an interesting thing to
Yeah,
like consider.
yeah, definitely. And making people question the reality of the photo itself and the emotion that he evokes. Is it genuine, and why you would feel that? There's a lot of layers to that, um, which which is which is great because you can juxtapose that in your work. You move pretty fluidly between some of the more playful aspects of things, right? Like before we get to X figures, my understanding is Friends and Legends was kind of the it eventually led to it, and this is something you were doing for fun, just to roast people that you were talking with on the timeline, or had interactions with.
Yeah. So Friends and Legends was for me one of those things where it was like it was born out of this just genuine experience that I was having where I was in group chats and I was like making fun of my friends and like doing it through these action figures as the medium for making fun of them. And people really liked them. And this was, nowadays you can get something much more slick from going to like, go to Sora and just write in, make an action figure. And so like back then it was not as easy, so people were much more easier to impress with it and stuff. But now like anyone can do it, and I recommend it. It's fun to do, like just using that the visual kind of cues that you could to communicate this like narrative about a person that's kind of like in some ways it's endearing and in other ways it might be seen as insulting as well. Alfredo, I didn't really insult that much because that one was a gift. I was like, I'm not going to diss you on a gift, but Friends and Legends was really done in a way where it was more about giving myself an opportunity and a reason to learn about people who were like, who I didn't quite know fully, because one of the things about the space that we are in is that, it's fairly faceless. We don't often talk with our voices to each other. A lot of it's through text. And so finding out about someone else is, sometimes harder to do. And by giving myself that project to do it, that's what like opened a lot of doors for me, because a lot of the people that I did it for, I ended up making friends with. So it was pretty good for me as an artist to do that.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to that in just a minute, but I think it has better context after we talk about X figures. So you created Friends and Legends for fun. My understanding is there's a winding path, but it eventually leads you to X figures, which is a very popular project. Incredible attention on the timeline. A lot of people became fans of your work if they weren't familiar with your work prior to that. Can you talk about how you went from there and ended up doing an homage to X Copy?
Yeah, so like it's that same idea of Friends and Legends, was that there was gaps in my knowledge, because I got to the scene on like 2022, right? But there was a whole world that happened before I got there, 2020, 2021, like 2017 even. Like all these things that happened, all these people were like OGs and like cemented in their kind of like positions and stuff like that. And I didn't have the context of being there when it happened, or having people who really even knew about it to talk to me about it. And so by doing Friends and Legends, that was a way about filling in the gaps in my knowledge about people, because I was like, I don't know who's who. I don't know who I should even, be talking to right now. And so Friends and Legends helped me a lot with that. And then when it came time for when I was doing X Figures, there was a big downturn at the start of 2025 and things were kind of slow. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to take some time to just research the history of the space, the artists who are the biggest ones, like your Sam Spratt, X Copy, and then also some other OGs like, Claire Silver and Money Lotto and like Coldy and stuff. And I was taking a lot of time to look at other people's work, their journey, their history, and their story, and then using that to think about what I wanted to do next. And I was at first thinking about doing a Friends and Legends season 3, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll cover some work from each of these people. And then I started looking more at X Copy and more at X Copy, and because he was so prolific, it ended up having to take so much of my attention to just try to figure him out. And so I ended up just going, all right, you know what, I'm just gonna do X Copy Selects will be the series, and I'll do 100. And then I just kept kept going and kept going, and I realized that I wanted to do all of them. I just kept digging into his work, and I found that by doing that, I was like, I was learning about him as an artist in a way that I hadn't before, because I had a reason to go from start to finish on, what's on xcopy.art, his approved catalog that he says is his canon. I limited it to that because there's actually a whole big world of stuff that happened on like Tumblr, and there's other things that happen in the space that he doesn't link to. So I just went with what he said was his approved canon, by sharing it. And so I was going through and I was like envisioning these as figures and stuff, and the way that I was doing it was by looking at his art, because it's not very figurative. Like, his art's pretty expressionistic, it's very abstract, it's kind of hard to pin down and say, oh, this is what it should be. And so I was looking at a lot of them and then feeling it out and going, oh, this feels like it'll be maybe this. And so I would sketch out the shape of it, and I would go, all right, this is the shape that I want. I wanted to have forearms, I wanted to have this kind of shaped head. And then, a lot of the time I would see his work and say, and envision that that was a face I was looking at. And I would say, what body has that face, or what person has that expression? And then that would inform for me how I make the figure. And so, yeah, that was a bit of a process, because, yeah, it involved like sketching them out and then feeding them through. There was a bit of a like production line of how I made them into what they ended up being. Basically, a lot of it's with AI, but it's informed by his art, my drawings, fed through AI, through like a couple processes. And so the end result, I think people really kind of responded to the character of a lot of them, and people really responded to that they were a bit fun as well. I really made sure to be as original as I could with their designs, but also to have fun with it, because I knew that there was no possible way that whatever body I would give these would be what Xcopy himself had thought they would be, because I was coming to them, this blank wall that is Xcopy. He's pretty like, mysterious. And I was coming to it with my own ideas. And so I was like, fuck it, I'll just make it what I think it is, because I can't know what Xcopy wanted it to be. And so X Figures really is my interpretations of Xcopy's work. It's not intended to be, a one-to-one of what I think Xcopy thought it should be. And so when I gave myself that license to be creative, and I gave myself that kind of that credence there to go, hey, my ideas for this will be worth seeing, I think that really kind of liberated me to make it as fun as I could, and to make it as kind of like charismatic and put personality into each one. And I think that's why people really responded to them so well.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly caught my attention. And of course, the Whale Vault is the #1 collector of OG 1 X copies. In fact, I very early, before I even really engaged with the project a lot, I was like, whoa, let me take a look at what all of our collection at Whale would look like lined up like this. And I'm like, this is sick. Like, if little kid me wants this right now in my office to play with, right? Like, so I think it evoked a lot of emotion for people from a collectability standpoint, from an accessibility standpoint, which I think is important, because like you said, X has this huge body of work, this history. Some people don't even know like who has what are the iconic pieces. And the cool thing was, you had this amalgamation that happened of people that love legacy crypto art, and people that are just into collectibles or PFPs or whatever. And they came together in this kind of unified way where they were excited about it, and it was a cultural moment. Hey, here's a way that you can engage with X that's accessible. Here's a way that you learn more about his collection. And I think that the authenticity of it, like the intent, because a lot of people have done things with X's work. It's CCO. He's obviously set records in the stratosphere for sales or whatever. But that aside, didn't have the same traction. So I think the authenticity of how you approached it and why was a beautiful thing, especially when you say you allowed yourself to have license with the creativity on what it would represent. Because like we know, I mean, we try to make these curatorial statements sometimes for things that we have in the vault. And I'm talking to my head of art, like, hey, did you realize that the eyeballs are actually people in boats? And when this was released, that this year, it was like people were, there was a lot of refugees capsizing. Like, there's so many different interpretations of what's happening. And to be able to have that discussion in a wider swath of people that are participating in the space, I think is amazing. So I think you made a great cultural contribution to the space personally, but I also think that's part of why it resonated so much and continues to resonate as a collection.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think the thing is that, like, X is someone who, people don't like to see it sometimes, but he's very political. And the thing is, like, his work does make statements and it does have stuff to say. And, like, I tried as much as I could when I saw that in there to represent the story of that in some way through the work. But, there's obviously a lot of blind spots there and stuff too, because, like I said, I wasn't around when he made a lot of this stuff too. And so I was coming at it from my perspective and my like limited view. But I think that like there's nothing wrong with that. And like you said, it opens up this discussion and it opens up this kind of ability for people to have this entry point to understand at least my journey through understanding Xcopy. Because like the thing is, when I started, I thought I knew a bit about Xcopy, and I knew a little bit, but not really. And then by the time I got to the end of it, I mean, there's so much I don't know about Xcopy, but I know at least like what all the work is, and I know at least when it happened and what the impact of it was, and like for me, seeing it all kind of like come together in that way where people were kind of engaging with it and looking at the originals and comparing them and seeing my kind of like process through that, it was really touching to me because like this was a big love letter to Xcopy really, and a love letter to his work. And one of the cool things that happened through this was that I did get in contact with him and stuff, and I gifted him actually right click save as girl. And I was talking to Jedi Wolf from the Doomdao about it, and he was like, I don't think I even know that piece, there is
Wow.
there is a problem on the website. Fear and Hyperion are swapped. Sorry, I gotta fix that. But yeah, there are people who are obsessed with Xcopy who don't even know all of these pieces, and I don't even know all of his pieces either. I just know what was on xcopy.art, and it was quite the journey to go and learn this stuff. And I think that like we have this incredible resource in the internet and incredible resource in the blockchain to be able to go and research things and be able to go, hey, what was this and what was that, and especially with someone like Xcopy, there's whole communities of people like the Doomdao and like others like the Whale Vault and stuff like that who are aficionados who collect this stuff and learn the story and like they take it seriously. And if I really wanted to know some more stuff about it, I could come and ask you about it. And that's an amazing thing about the crypto art space is that it's alive. It's not this is a moment of history that we're living through. Imagine being in the time of the surrealists and stuff like that, or like the Bauhaus movement and stuff, and being able to go to the different artists and ask them what they thought about things. And they might not tell you, but you could also ask the collectors of that time what they think of things too. And so we're currently living in an art movement, and to me that's really fascinating.
Yeah, with recordable provenance of people's participation in it, right, on the blockchain, which is part of what makes it super dope. You talked about some of the people like the Jedi, like Jedi Wolf and the Doom DAO. Of course, Whale. We have a stash. There's a lot of collectors that have been involved with Xcopy for a long time. But I love that this allows people from all over the ecosystem, even people that may not have been into X at all and just into PFPs, or maybe they just like pop vinyls because these things, pull on those heartstrings as well, getting involved. So I think that talks to the staying power of it. A couple of things that were interesting to me about this collection after it dropped, I was compelled to want to say, hey, this is a cool piece that are in our vault. I want to make sure I scoop one. I saw other people doing that as well. Then I saw the inverse, right? I saw people saying, you know what? I have tons of exposure and know all about this piece that's a marquee piece in my collection or that I'm always a fan of. So that's why I want to grab an X figure of something else.
Yeah.
Because I want to have something from somewhere else, which was cool. Even to the point where I saw this the other day, right? Where Cruel came on and said, you know what, I got the X figure, so I want to go get the X copy. And it kind of the inverse happened. So that's really cool to see.
Dude, and that's not the first I saw with that as well. One of our other collectors also picked up like all of the non-NFT Summit ones as well because they just like the work and they're like, you know what, I got it through X figures and now I'm going to go get the X copy as well. And they got Classico, Exploitar 2. Like, and I think that seeing I think that over time you might see more of it too, where people get the X figure, they love it, and then they get the X copy, and like, it's. I didn't think that that would be the case. I thought it would be the other way around, where people would get the X copy, have the X copy, and be like, I really want the one. And there are circumstances, like there are examples within the collection where people have, paid a premium price to have the one that they want just to lock it down, and like say overflowing. I'm pretty sure I think that's Monad or someone. It's like basically the one person who had zero was the one who bought zero in my collection, and I wasn't even thinking about putting zero in the collection because zero is such an interesting case because it is an artwork with no artwork. Like it's just a metadata tag on super rare, and like that one I was like, how do we even make a figure out of that? Like, and eventually I just figured it out. But like there was a lot of times where I hit walls in this process where I was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that one. I'm just going to move on and I'll come back to it. But yeah, people have come out for the pieces that they really connect to. And, that means that there is this kind of like this forever homes for some of these. Some people aren't going to sell the piece that they got, or they're not going to let go of it, except for when it's really really convincing for them to do so. And so like the supply is only 404 pieces, but like circulation on it's much lower than that. And I'm not one to really give a shit about flaws. Like I don't think that that's oh, this is just showing what someone's going to pay for it at the bottom and stuff like that. I don't think flaws are too important. They are important a little bit, but they don't keep me awake at night. But yeah, I think that there are going to be circumstances where less and less of these end up circulating, and more of them just end up where they end up. And so it's a really interesting thing about this collection is that eventually there might come a time where you can't get them.
Yeah, some of the discussion that we've had within our Discord was interesting. I know someone was talking about, sometimes they talk about exposure to different things when the market provides you an opportunity, not just X, like all kinds of stuff
Yeah,
from whatever, little penguin, whatever, all kinds of stuff. And in the discussion about XCopy at one point, people were often citing things that were more accessible that maybe weren't as known ubiquitously. Like, for example, his sandbox avatar that he created, or his visor from Crypto Voxels, which Whale Shark used to have but lost in a hack. That's very sad to me, but I think it ended up in good hands. But either way, there was other things that are kind of tertiary to his main collections. There was never a reference to like something that was an homage or a third party had put together, right? Because it was, if you can get his provenance from his wallet minting, that's the goal. But there's been some discussion about this, like, hey, maybe I need an X figure. And I think it's that blend that you talked about, the affinity of being accessible, pop culture. People were excited about it. It had the gotcha mechanic, and it was a cultural moment. I think that you provided a good place for education and a lot of other cool things. So super dope. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this, because people ask me all the time. I know you address this question all the time, but I'd have to ask, what is the evolution of X figures? You've had the burn redeem for Mutatio. I think there's another edition coming out after that. There's been some discussion about a continuation of possibly the project in some different ways.
Yeah, so the next iteration of X figures, there's two different things that are happening. The next thing is basically I'm going to be doing some honoraries of people in the X figure style, because I think it'll just be a fun kind of thing to do. That's going to be something where they're not going to be for sale. They're going to just be gifted to people as this kind of like a bit of a celebration of X figures. And so that'll be something where I'll be reaching out to various communities and various people that are selected and stuff, and doing some honoraries, and it'll be highlighting some also community members from ours. So, like the top 10 holders, or say something like that. And then, whoever wants to claim theirs, they can. So when I get the time to do that, I will. I'm just I have a lot of overlapping deadlines right now on various different things, because X figures kind of opened a lot of doors for me, which I'm very grateful for. But like, I also don't want to forget the community, because there is a really big community building around it and stuff, and I want to kind of like show them some like just some recognition for them, sticking around and being a part of it and stuff. And I just want to show some appreciation for them. but yeah, so the next thing is the honoraries, and then after that, the next series, I guess, of X figures will be not focused on X copy and instead on either another artist, or I can't get into what the other option is because it'll give it away. But there is another option I'm toying with, but I need to experiment. And like the thing is as well, I don't really like to commit to something until I've experimented and seen what it will look like or how it will feel doing it. Because like I said, if it's dishonest as an artist, I don't want to do it. You know what I mean? If I'm just ticking the boxes,
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
doing it. You
absolutely.
know?
I caught some of your conversation with Awful Eye last night, and I think
Oh
you
yeah,
guys were talking about being neurotypical and ADHD, and in a past life, I spent a lot of time doing music myself, and found that the minute it's an objective, like I need to do whatever for a deadline or a compilation or whatever, my creative output is very different than when I catch lightning and just I'm super into it and doing it. Right, the minute it becomes a
yeah,
task, then it's not optimal for me. Sometimes I even think, all right, I know I got to do a shit song because I got to get that off my slate because everything afterwards will be good because I covered off on what I had to do. So 100% get it. Looking forward to seeing what that is. In that vein, you also were just all over the timeline with your latest 6529 meme card, uh, which was really cool to see. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. But before we get to the latest, this was not your first meme card. You had a foray into meme cards previously, number 300, which is pretty cool. And
yeah,
then recently, I'm sure everybody tuning in had seen, Only Survivors win. That was, 400 plus, I think, people that
yeah.
were part of this. And so, if you want to just touch on this and how this came together and kind of what your objective was.
Yeah, sure. So, the memes community is one that was really interesting. How I ended up doing a meme card and how I ended up in the community. The funny thing is that like everything in my kind of like path in my journey really has this specific line that runs through it and stuff, and that it is that Friends and Legends opened the door to the memes community because I did one for a guy named Tixels, and he actually is part of the 6529 team. And he was like, yeah, he was just like, this is really cool. I love it. I want you to be part of that community so I could do more of them of people who were in there because I knew them because they thought it was really cool. And so they brought me into like their group chat, the meme maxis and stuff, and I got to meet a lot of the people who were like, obsessively a part of that community, and I got to be really engrossed with like, or just like living within that community and learning about what they like and learning about how they, the things that are important to them. And then after about a year in that community, I was like, I want to do my own meme card now. And I approached the team and I was curated in. Yeah, that makes it sound easy. It was actually pretty hard, but like it was fine. And then yeah, well, we were working on my first meme card, this one, Only Winners Survive. And the funny thing is that the first ideas that I came to the team with were very kind of surface level on the idea of what memes are, and very kind of like yeah, they were very much like this surface level understanding of memes. I was like, oh look, Pepe Frog, or this is Pepe and stuff like that. And they were like, no, don't do that. Everyone does that. And we really workshopped this idea. And I was like, well, I've got this other piece of art that I'm working on, this other collection, and it was this idea that you can see playing out in Only Winners Survive and also in Only Survivors Win. And it was this idea about the elevation of some above others and this gated wall, the closed garden, this the Valhalla that people imagine of like the inner cabal of people who are these winners and stuff, and everyone else below them. And so really having that visualized platform that is got the ladders, and sometimes there's ladders there and sometimes there's not. And that was this way of communicating this idea of what it's like to be progressing through a career as an artist and what it's like to be progressing through any kind of career, really. It was something that I think is very understandable and relatable for people because we all live in that world. You know what I mean? No matter what you do, there's going to be levels of success and levels of kind of like toil and the way that you work up to getting into the closed garden, and the way that sometimes it feels like you can never get there as well. And so that was the idea for Only Winners Survive. And I really kind of credit 6529 for pushing me to do it, because I was like, I don't know, it seems kind of like, it seems so honest that people might be offended. But what ended up happening with it was that, yeah, I just kept having these ideas for how to do it. And I designed this actually, as you see, you're going through it, as this interactive piece, so that it was designed with this randomness built into it. And the randomness is not just random, there's rarity to it as well. So what you get is not always the same. And what you get, there are some pieces you might never see. And I designed that one with like 300 parts to it, with an intention that there might be parts of it that you never actually get to see. And so that was something that was interesting to me, to gamify it and to make it this thing where there's all these different ways to experience this core concept that was broken down into its parts. And so that experience really informed my next card, which was Only Survivors Win. And I did design it. I did design it as a interactive card, but they did make a change when they went to community curation, to be more decentralized. They wanted to make it so that it's less hands-on for the team to have to do things, and that means less security when it comes to the dynamic NFTs, the HTMLs. And so to lock it all down, they were like, look, we're not going to do HTMLs until we figure out a way to kind of foolproof it, so that we're not letting someone mint malware into the memes.
Right.
And so I didn't even know that when I submitted. I was like, yeah, cool. Look, I got this interactive piece, and the app works. Like, it works really well, but it's not able to be in the memes just yet. But there is a potential that later on we can change the metadata, but it'll be once they figured out the solution for everyone. And so once I found that out, I had to go and to have a system within it to set a slideshow mode that I could set the time that I wanted it to run for, and then say over that time you have to show every card at least once. And so that's why it is still random now, but yeah, it shows every piece that I did for it. So yeah, I did this one with the idea, it was a similar kind of thing, but it was more personal this way. It was something that I could talk about people rather than just the concept. And I could talk about what it's like to be a winner with the trappings of success. The medal is like the money, or like the accolades, or like the things that you get that are tangible for winning. And the flowers are like the recognition and the respect, and the things that are kind of more ephemeral and short-lived, like validation and praise is usually only so long-lived. So yeah, that was something more ephemeral with the flowers. And then with this idea of standing above the people below who didn't win, that idea was about this really separating them into this tiers of success. And so it was that same thing with Only Winners Survive, just presented more close up and more kind of emotive and personal. And yeah, I found in that kind of structure of this meme that there was something really kind of Renaissance about it, but there was also something that was really kind of fun to do, to explore, and to adapt to all these different people. And again, I did that thing where I set myself the limit, and I go, here's the limit, I'll do 100. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I did 300 for my last meme card. Maybe I'll do 300 again. And then I did 300. And there was so many people that I was like, oh, I left this person off and I left that person off. And so I ended up just literally just going, all right, we'll do 400, and I can't do any more. And so that's kind of where we ended up for the amount of people. And it's 400, and then it's 57 artworks that show interstitially between them, to give this idea of the torn posters and the layered band posters and stuff. And that was a big kind of another inspiration. There was this idea of band posters as well.
Yeah, I heard you talking about that, and I like that conceptually, where it's like something is at the forefront of attention and getting all the accolades, and it's vibrant, and then you just take another poster and plaster it right over it, and plaster right over it, and eventually you see the tears coming through. And what does that represent? What does that mean? And that's really up to the interpretation of those checking it. So I think, I'm not sure the iteration, but there was one where you could click on the piece itself and then it would switch, it would rip the poster. And also I think I had seen an iteration where you had 65 or so AI songs that you had you had created and curated to be included in this as well. So you were really pushing the limits, or you were really pushing the limits of what they could do here. They had to say, "Hey, slow down. We love that you're inventive, but you're going ham on this one."
I had to think a bit smaller to to deliver. So that's the thing, man. I really hope that it can exist in its most ideal form. And that I had toyed with the idea of going, oh, you know what? I'll airdrop a copy of the dynamic version to everyone who has it. But then I was like, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to devalue the meme in the memes. You know what I mean? I think that the memes is the ideal collection. You know what I mean? In terms of where this should live. So I didn't want to go, all right, and here's the better version that is on my own contract. You know what I mean? And then
Right.
have that dilute the value, but also dilute the attention and confuse the kind of product. You know what I mean? If it can only exist in one way, it should exist in the memes. And even though a better form of it exists, you know, hopefully that can
Right.
end up there. But yeah, doing the songs, that there were actually, the specific reasoning for doing the songs was that I had this, you know, there is on 6529, there is under education the tweet storms by 6529, and they really have a lot of the foundations of that community, and it really has, it's like they're like cultural relics for the memes community, and they explain a lot about what's important to them, and they explain a lot about the ideas that kind of inspire them and stuff. And so taking those thoughts and passing them through a specific GPT that I built that was geared towards understanding concepts and communicating them into lyrics that aren't shit. And that was the hard part, is like making it be able to make lyrics. But also the GPT also does kind of like song directions based on, like, you know, I would write out what kind of progressions I want in the song, and like the actual instrumentation is all prompted as well. And so like every part of these songs was kind of like built by AI, but built in a curated way that was made to not sound bad. And my reasoning for doing it was to create a passive way of experiencing the tweet storms, and something you could do. You could have it in the background, and these ideas would be given to you in a different way. And you know, I thought that that was really cool, and I hope that it can end up eventually living in the memes properly.
Yeah, I'd seen you talk about making a push to the metadata because it would just be additive at one point. It wouldn't really change anything of why people collected it. Really like your explanation on how you used AI and why you did. I know there's a lot of AI haters in music that don't really understand the complexity of how to add it in. Uh, your process sounds not dissimilar to what Rare Skrilla talks about in his practice and how he's woven it in. So, well-known and accoladed traditional musician that has been using AI in his practice for a long time, and of course, a big presence on Bitcoin with his, you know, what he puts on the blockchain as well. So, super dope that you did that. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, you mentioned something that was interesting to me, that you didn't want to dilute the effectiveness of the memes as a collection and how it's kind of out there and what it does. Between this and X Figures, talk to me about leveraging network effect with intent like you do, because it seems like you really think this through, as being a vehicle combined with your artistic intent, right? A lot of times I think people try to segment it and think that they live in separate areas, and you kind of weave between the two, and it's pretty fluid. How do you think about leveraging that in Web3? Is it community driven, memetics? What is that to you?
I think that it is both community driven and memetics, and I think that, you know, one of the things that really also informed what I did with Only Survivors Win, and what I think led to its virality and led to its success, the way that it has been showing up on the timeline and the way that it did, is that I actually did almost the exact same thing about 3 months just before I released X Figures. I did something very similar with I had this thing that I was doing where I was like moisturizing people's PFPs, and it was making these really kind of like mogged out versions of people's PFP, and like they were like, you know, high cheekbones and big jaws and like, you know, arched eyebrows and stuff, and then really like moisturized all over and glossy, and like just making people look like assholes. And I was doing that for no specific reason other than that it was really funny. And the first couple people I did it for didn't really appreciate it. They thought I don't know. I think they didn't really think it was that funny. But then I thought it was hilarious. So I just kept doing it. And I was like, I'll just do it to this person and that person. And then I just was like doing it over and over and putting it on the timeline and tagging people. And then, I noticed something really interesting that happened with it, right? Is that the more people talked about it and the more people started showing theirs and being, this is funny, that other people who didn't think it was so funny at first started finding it really funny. And so like it's this that network effect is this social kind of effect where you get this kind of like social validation that happens, where people have this not FOMO in this sense. This is more kind of like a community feeling where people go, oh, what did you get? What did I get? You know what I mean? And by doing these kind of like honorary homages to people and stuff like that, one, I'm showing them some love by doing something that shows that I've done even the most cursory level of research into them. And it also shows them a bit of love in the care and the way that I've produced it. And so, by doing this, I'm devoting some of myself to them and some of my art to them. And that moisturizing thing, they weren't for sale. And they weren't limited just to big accounts. I was literally just doing it to anyone. I was
You're
like, tag someone.
moisturizing everyone.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm doing it fully, like, I'm doing it pro bono. I was doing it for free because I didn't care. It wasn't really for money. It was just for fun. But like, what happened was that everyone was talking about me. Everyone was saying, you Nuclear Samurai this, Nuclear Samurai that. You know what I mean? I was getting a lot of tags, and I was getting a lot of people going, "Oh, can you do my friend?" And I was doing little accounts as much as I was big accounts, and people with 100 followers, 50 followers. I didn't care. I was like, yeah, I'll do you. I don't care. You know what I mean? And like people, the thing that was interesting, those people would go and tell their friends who might have been bigger accounts about me. And like I think that was something that was can't be discredited, is that like it doesn't matter who you're talking to in this space, everyone knows each other. Don't be a dick. Like don't freeze people out because they're a small account. You know what I mean? Like you don't know who knows who. But and even without even that as a consideration, just do it because it's nice. Like I think
Right.
that by doing these posters on Only Survivors Win, there's a lot of people in the 400 who aren't big artists. They aren't big names, but they're still going in that like yearbook that this is, because it's essentially a time capsule for 2025. And when it does go to being dynamic, which fingers crossed, I'm sure it'll happen at some point. I actually kind of have a selfish hope that it's like a couple months away at least, so that I can get another couple hundred of these done into there and have it maybe sit around the 600 mark, because I think it would be funny.
That'll be
Yeah.
that'll be fire. To your point about it not being just impressive people, this guy ended up in its. So full disclosure, I ended up getting a surprise inclusion in it. And my understanding is, if I heard you correctly, was that it was just your algorithm, right? It was like you wanted
Yeah.
to approach it in an authentic way and not be like, hey, these are big names that maybe retweet me, which it sounds like actually the inverse happened, right? It was, at the grassroots where people really pushed support from the ground up, and then it kind of avalanched afterwards. But it was just whoever would show up in your algorithm. You said, okay, this person for whatever reason is here. Like, let's make a rendition of it. And your target of 100 ended up 400 plus.
Yeah, well, it's a big algorithm. So, I mean, look, there are some people I picked because they're my friends. You know what I mean? Like, there's some people I was like,
Sure,
yeah.
but it wasn't a hit list. It wasn't like you had a list of 400, like you had your X copy pieces that you wanted to be true to what the collection. It was, hey, there's some randomness involved in this, and I guess some randomness in the network effect as well. So what's the balance here for you between, like, is there any intent, or is it just kind of as it comes to you, between playfulness, remix, meme culture, and then your serious conceptual art, and then in your practice and some of the things you do? Or do you just kind of, I create and let it live where it lives?
Look, I should really have more of a plan for some things than I do. The thing is, this actually was planned for when it happens, because mainly just because of when I have time to. And so, basically, as it goes for timeline 2025, I had X figures and then Ninfa and then Verse, right? And I knew I wanted to do another meme card, and the only time I could fit that in, because I have a holiday between Ninfa and Verse, is before is between X Figures and Ninfa. So I was like, I have to get this meme card done before I do my Ninfa drop, and then I have to, do like, I'm really having to segment out my work and go, all right, this fits here, this fits there, and I've had to turn down a lot of offers for collaborations and stuff like that, because I'm just like, no, I have to focus on the work that I have. But yeah, I'm like, yeah, is there a plan on like when it's serious and when it's playful and fun? No, I really do follow my heart with it. And I am someone who has, I've got a lot of emotional range in me on how I feel about some things and stuff. And sometimes I want to make a commentary about something that is funny, and sometimes I want to make a commentary about something that's kind of like sad or serious or melancholy. And like, I think that, it probably maybe does a disservice to myself that my work doesn't so neatly end up being like, oh, that's the guy who does this. But like, that ends up being, for me at least, this kind of like roadmap to how I felt in that moment. You know what I mean? And I go, oh, I look at this and I go, oh, that was when I felt like this, and that was when I felt like that. And for me, this is my diary, because I've never really been good at keeping a diary. I can't do it. Like, I get a diary and I'm like, dear diary, day one, dear diary, day two. And then by day 3 or 4, I'll like start to fall off and I'm like, oh, well, I missed a day there. But like,
Right.
by having this art, the things that I really want to do when I do them, that actually says who I am in that moment. And I think for me, it's about putting myself onto the canvas as much as it is about just the ideas that I have, because every idea is passed through me. And I think that that's my justification for doing it the way that I do.
Yeah, and I appreciate the context. I think that's part of, the appeal of you as a creative to a lot of people is the range and the depth, but they're not separate entities. It really is a cohesive kind of underlying approach that you have. So, there's some playfulness in the highbrow conceptual pieces, and there's a lot of, depth to some of the things that seem more fun if you want to look below the surface. And I ask that relative to, with intent, because there are artists that evoking a certain response from the people that are engaging with their art is purposeful. You could even say that maybe Modest, right, with his drop and what he had done, or some people traditionally talked about maybe Pac or whomever, right, leveraging the contract, leveraging the response from the market. That's something that people do, and you just kind of naturally do it in the way that you engage. So that's super cool. Like, for example, I remember I was looking at your meme card stuff, and then I hopped over to Covenant with the with what was going on with the insects and checking that project out, and I was like, man, the range here is super dope. I'd encourage anybody that just checked out your, X Figures or your meme cards to also check out, the depth of what you have for your link tree. Like, I popped into your super rare, and you have this section where you've I guess it's kind of like where you just would throw some different stuff up here in this folder. But like, some of these were absolutely bananas to me, that this is just where you're stashing ideas as you make them, like some really cool explorations with AI and glitch and whatnot. So, I don't know your plans for how you're laying this out, but it's super dope to see.
With this collection, every day is another day. I realized something about some stuff, and I was like, you know what? There's so many times where I've made something and I've gone, oh yeah, that's really cool. I should put it on the chain, and I don't have a collection for it, and I don't have a place to put these explorations and stuff like that. And one of the things that I really learned from Xcopy was the value, and I say value not talking about monetary value. I'm talking about artistic value, in the value in having this record of your progress, and like having this kind of space to see things unfold over time. And the thing that was, I think, really cool about Xcopy's early career, and you'll appreciate this from WowDAO being such big holders of his one of ones, is that when he was doing all those one of ones on Super Rare, they were really diverse, and they were really kind of exploring something really personal for him in a lot of these like diaristic ways and stuff like that. And for me, seeing that kind of made me realize, if I have the idea and it doesn't have somewhere to live, and I know that I'm not going to take it somewhere later, maybe I should put it on chain. I should put it somewhere. And the idea with Every Day is Another Day is that I'm not advertising it really. I don't really care if it's collected. It's not really aimed at being a sellout collection and stuff like that. They're listed because I think it's funny when people find them. But like, it's really a place for me to put these things, so that that there is this record of my progression through exploring some ideas and really kind of giving myself some freedom to explore aesthetically some different things there. So yeah, that's that collection.
Yeah, so I literally broke super rare as we were checking that. I'll check back on that in a minute, but definitely encourage people to check that out. Nuke, I just realized the time. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're juggling some family stuff and it's during the day there. Do you have a few more minutes to talk about what's next for you as well as some community questions?
Yeah, I got plenty of time. My next thing's on in like a couple hours. So yeah,
All right.
today's
All right.
today's
Okay. I can talk. I think I said beforehand, I'll talk about tacos for an hour. So I'm the wrong person to give open time to. Believe me. Believe me. I did have some other questions here that I'd love to cover off with you.
yeah.
From a process perspective, like, how do you decide when hey, this is a concept, like I'm going to go take this, and try to put it in my workflow? Are you just experimenting pretty frequently with AI, and when something hits, or you take the concept to the sketch pad like you've described about, X figures, and that's kind of your workflow there?
I think that it's really important, specifically, I think it's really important that, when being in this kind of like emerging art like medium, is when the opportunity arises to experiment, to take it, you know what I mean? And like, so I do a lot of experimentation with tools and with style and with genre, and like I don't limit myself in that way because I have a lot of concepts and ideas that might not have somewhere to go. But yeah, I always try to leave myself time in a week and stuff like that, or to play, and because some of my best ideas come from that. Some of my best like things that end up becoming, the hits are just things that I was fucking around with, and like I think it's really important not to get so rigid in one particular way of doing things that you're not open to what might come from another way of doing things. So yeah, I'm often on a lot of the different tools. I actually work as a I have like a sort of sometimes job that comes up, like bounties come up to do AI video research and stuff. So I'll actually like benchmark the tools and stuff, and I get paid for it because it's what I was going to do anyway. Like I'm benchmarking them on my own time. So like that is really cool because that just kind of like gives me some like I guess objective reasons to do things a particular way too. But yeah, man, I just love to do it. I do it because I am obsessed with creating things with the different ways to do it. And like for me, there is this real drive to explore and there's real drive to create, and it's like an urgency to create. Like it's something that I have to do. I don't really have a choice in the matter, and so if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna push myself to explore as much as I can. Yeah, so this one's like 6 minutes long. At the time that I made it, it was the longest that I had made. But really kind of this one I spent so long on because it was for the Artifact Film Festival, and there was going to be a director who was judging it, who like Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who I just really love, and he did like Alien Resurrection. So I just wanted to make sure that I was submitting something good for it, and so like I put a lot into this, and there's some things that I just do get obsessed with, and it might not be logical or it might not be a good idea to do it the way that I do, but I just do it, like there's
right.
I'm driven to do the things, to do it the best that I can.
Yeah, I heard part of the conversation last night where people were asking about X figures and possibly getting like a physical of it, and it's funny because the beginning of this video kind of ties into that a little bit for me, especially with you saying that sometimes you get the urge and you have to do it. I had a conversation with Giant Swan, who is a an AI, not an AI, but an artist that does sculpting in VR, that does incredible stuff. And I remember talking to him about a particular project and what it would take to bring it forth, and it was like an exorbitant expense. He's like, this would be crazy to do. I'm like, why
Yeah.
don't you do this alternative X, Y, and Z, because it'd be more palatable and affordable or whatever. And he's like, yeah, because fuck the expense. This is about my legacy, right? Like, I want the
Yeah.
stuff that they make fake eyeballs out of. I was like, whoa, I gotta find the exact quote because it's definitely quote worthy. I might see if he's okay with me sharing some of the conversation, but it definitely reminded me of that at the beginning when I saw the eyeballs, and you were talking about just being compelled to just fuck it. You just got to do it sometimes, right? You just got to move forward. So, super
But
dope.
he's right though. Like, if you're gonna do it, you should do it right. You know what I mean? And like, there comes a time for compromise, and there comes a time for, like, I mean, everything has to have some level of
Right.
compromise. You have to release the work eventually. You can't just work on it endlessly. And like, I've done that. I've worked on some things endlessly and then not released them, and it's so unsatisfying to do that. But like, you also, you do owe it to the work to do the best you can within reason. And so, like, yeah, that's the thing with X figures physicals is, can it be done? Yes. But it's very expensive. And in terms of like seeing, I don't know, in terms of like seeing the kind of like the value proposition to it and stuff like that, to produce it in a way that would be to the quality that it should be, to give people to give the work what it deserves to exist. I don't know, it might ruin me. So like,
Right,
I'm
right, but
not
it's
willing
still
to go
something
down that
it's
path.
still something that you clearly pondered, as has he. So I
Oh
always
yeah,
found that to be a fascinating conversation. Tell me a little bit about what the progression is for you. What do you have on the docket, and what's next? I know you referenced something just before this call. I love to talk about it, but also I saw this and wanted to touch on it a little bit. Nuke.eth, kind of
yes.
an extension persona. What's this about?
So Nuke.eth is I'm going to transition into it just being called Nuke because I think it's less complicated. So it's going to be a bit of a pathway, but you can find it on Transient Labs. I'm basically just making work on a different wallet for this one, that is more accessible, more affordable, limited, like limited edition sort of thing. They are more narrow in their aesthetic, so that the progression on this one wallet is just one kind of, like, not one aesthetic, but just a narrower kind of way of doing things. That's because, like you saw with my main collection, it's much more aesthetically broad. And I wanted to do something with Nuke.eth where it was about this idea of embracing this really um, confronting way of doing things, of showing things that are really dark in a really kind of like stark and confronting, humorous way. Um, like, this one where he's beating the guy and he's having a cup of tea and a laugh and stuff. Like, the thing is, that's that there is something, this like hyper realistic kind of way of seeing things there. And that is actually really related to my next thing. So Nuke.eth is going to exist, or Nuke specifically is going to exist as not exactly an alt. I'll just say it's a side project. And the side project will be basically something that has an aesthetic through line that when you just chart that project, the aesthetic through line will be much cleaner. And so it will be something that, in a historic kind of perspective, will be easier to follow its birth and progression.
Interesting. Yeah, so I'm keeping tabs on it for sure after I had seen it, and then it kind of lives on its own, and it seems like you like to do it a little bit, like put some breadcrumbs out there for people to follow and discover some new aspects of your artistic practice and different things that you're doing. And now we have something new as well, right, on the horizon.
Yeah, so this is the next evolution of Nuke. And so this is the progression from that. So what you just saw was from a series, Mandatory Compliance, and it was just a little limited edition series. This is called Stress, and this is coming to Ninfa, and it's really, it's about a lot of things. There's a lot of really kind of personal feelings in there about just contemporary life and the ways that we live, within these kind of like contrived systems that you know make us feel a certain way. And it's about looking at this the natural order of things compared to the contrived human spaces that are built around these structures and limitations and uh, like enclosures that we put ourselves into. And so yeah, it's probably like my most ambitious work in terms of it is very experimental, and it is very kind of like confronting and emotional and heavy. And I don't know how people are going to respond to it, but it's something that, like I said, I wanted to make because it was where my energy was pushing me to. And it's something that is very personal to me. A lot of the stuff in there is very personal. And I think that when you do that and when you look at yourself and say something that's honest, there will be some people who see themselves in it too. And so, yeah, that's the goal with this, is to just touch onto something that is kind of like so personal that it becomes universal.
I love it. I love that your goal is always your expression and not necessarily, how it's going to be received. It's more that you just want to be authentic in the way that you put it out there. And that's part of why it resonates, I think, right, universally from X Figures to some of your other things. So is this live, or is this something that's gonna be up soon?
This is not live. This is Monday the 25th. You're actually the first person seeing any of this other than me and the curator. So
Oh, wow. Alpha,
yeah,
as
yeah,
I'm known to do, just because I take so long in the conversation. So
yeah. So
I
no one else has
appreciate
seen
it.
it. Yeah,
I'm sure
really
people in
love
my
my stuff.
Discord are going a little crazy right now because they know my affinity for all things squids, and now there's squids on the screen with us. This just happened, guys. This was coincidence, I swear. So super dope. Thank you for sharing with that. Did I hear that also that you'll be doing some curation in the near future as well?
I can't comment on that. But keep your eyes out. You'll see it on the timeline. But yeah, there is something happening. I can't
Okay, all
really.
right.
Uh,
Something for I always try to reel in a little bit, Nuke. So, but I'm not trying to get you in trouble, but we'll see what that manifests into. If you have a couple minutes, I have some questions that the community we
yeah.
pulled together when they knew we were going to be talking with you. So I got some questions, and I got a couple of them DM'd to me, which are questionable, but I think that they're passable here. So I'll let these ones slide. First up. X Figures. Well, I think you had already answered this to some effect, but I'll throw it out there anyway because I know they want a Hail Mary. X Figures next steps mention new artists or collections. Are you aiming for more cultural touchstones, or can you tease what else it could be?
It will be whatever it is. It will be culturally very important to Web3.
Okay. Okay, a lot of homework for someone to do, right? So someone's going to go studiously work on that. What's CCO? What's not? What's likely? We'll see what happens. Here's a good one. I like this one a lot. You mentioned studying other artists like Coldy and A Lot of Money. Were there anyone else? Why did you choose them? And what did you glean from taking a look at their work and practice?
Hmm. That is a great question. Were there anyone else? Yes, there were. A lot of it was a lot of like the OG, like the old class sort of thing. Uh, Blanking so hard though because I spent so much time. I kind of did a lot of the start, and then it kind of like progressed only to Xcopy. It took up a lot of my mind space. But yeah, well, the main ones was I'll get into Coldy and Money a lot, right? The things that I took away from their practice was a lot about the way that they kind of really owned their style, and they really kind of like used it to talk about these things that were um, relevant to their passion or relevant to their interests. Um, the things that were these accessible points into like crypto at the time, a lot of it is about finance, and a lot of it is about kind of like, with like Coldy and like Dirty Money and stuff like that. Like there are these like symbolic elements that come through in their work that I found really interesting, the way they used this visual language for developing their style and developing how we come to know them. In terms of like, I spent a lot of time looking at Claire Silver as well because I love Claire Silver, and like the thing is, I wouldn't be where I am without her. So because she really put me on in 2023 like he curated me into a show that was like, you know, with artists who were far above me. And like that opened a lot of doors for me and stuff. So I think that with Claire, one of the things that I really kind of took away a lot of is that idea of not being kind of like married to just one way of doing things, and being open to owning the limitations of the tools at the time, and then leveraging the fact that these are things that will go on to be important purely just you know, one, on the way that you approach them, but two, on the way that they are a time marker of their time. And so those were things that I was taking away from looking at like people like that. And the things that I took away from Sam Spratt versus Xcopy, this was a big one because I actually did a Sam Spratt derivative series that I never released either.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've got it, but I made the mistake. Well, not mistake, but I asked the Sprats for permission to put it out there, and they just never got back to me. And the thing is, like, they were really nice, but they were too busy at the time. And so, yeah, I was like, all right, I'll just keep that on the back burner. But the things that I learned from them is it's really interesting seeing these two different ways to enter the space. X, as you all know, he moved up from you know, selling $10 editions and stuff like that, or like struggling to sell $10 editions and stuff, into
Right.
the position that he's in now. So he worked from this real kind of like persistence, an underdog kind of like position. And it was really kind of like a benefit of time of having been so early and prolific, and someone who was pervasive and was willing to try things and put himself out there and stuff like that. And so he has this massive supply, and it doesn't really matter, you know what I mean, in terms of like where his positioning is, because that's, you know, it works for him. And then you have Sam Spratt, and Sam has this kind of like much tighter, really kind of like concise lineage of his art. He enters in a way where he was kind of like, I guess he was already successful, and so like he already had a name for himself in the traditional art world, or like at least in, you know, the music space and stuff like that. And so he was entering from this position where he was already had the fanfare and already was at this high value position and stuff. And so he had this really super controlled tight supply. And just watching the comparison between the two of them, because at the time they were the only two people who were actually kind of like, you know, commanding mind share as artists and stuff like that, and being this safe bets during Deep Bear and stuff like that. So that's why I really wanted to look at them and go, oh, what makes up their history and their story? Because if I rewind them by a few years, then that might be where I am. And so I was seeing a lot more of my own story in Xcopy than I was in Sam Spratt, obviously. And so for me, there was a lot more to learn from that.
Interesting. And I love how that evolved when you say, "Hey, here there's some synergy here, there's some similarities. Let me see this pathing." We have this discussion frequently in the Whale Discord because we have a unique kind of lineage of people that were creators and artists or whatever. And you know, the supply discussion happens pretty frequently. There's no, you know, one size fits all. You got to find what works for you for sure. But one thing that's frequently said, especially from the collector side that participate in that conversation, is, you know, when it's segmented in a way, you can continue to build, and it just has a different effect than, you know, if you put everything together, right? And it looks like that's something that you're doing with intent already. Like you had nuke.eth, you have some different entities, some different ways that you approach it. So that was definitely cool. So thank you for sharing that. And great question, by the way, guys. Great question.
Yeah,
I like this one. This is a good transition. The AI song Slap. What are some of your favorite hip hop artists?
Sick. Man, I can't wait for you guys to hear like all 65. I've actually put them on Spotify. I'm just waiting for DistroKid to get through it and put them on. So it's been a couple of days, but when they're out there, just keep your eyes out. I'll make a post about it. But all 65 will be available for people to listen to. So who are my favorite artists? Love, honestly, Mac Miller was a huge influence to me, and like I absolutely loved Mac Miller. I loved what he did as Larry Fisherman. I love what he like as a producer. I love what he did. You know, even the Delusional Thomas and stuff like that. Like Mac Miller was really cool. Tyler the Creator, Earl Sweatshirt, MF Doom, Kendrick Lamar. Like, you know, I really like people who have that really interesting way of approaching their lyrics, that they're real storytellers, and the way that they incorporate narrative into their work. In terms of like musically in hip hop, like, I mean, I even really like, KRS-One and like Nas and like even the G-Funk era and stuff like that. Like I'm very much like I don't like to limit myself to just one thing in terms of music. But like, oh, I also really like Flying Lotus as well. Um, I think that hip hop is really interesting in that it is the most storyteller of music. Like hip hop and country are like really storyteller music, and it's about the way that they kind of put these narratives together. But hip hop has this thing with this, the lyricism has this, like, the cadence and the rhymes and stuff like that. Like it's not always about the way that things rhyme in couplets and stuff like that, because that's kind of lame. But the way that things might rhyme, their consonants, the way that they hit in the middle of the of something, and then they create this kind of like soothing kind of like repetition and echo within each other and stuff like that. Like that stuff to me is really interesting. And so I try to put a lot of that in my own work and stuff, in terms of like, I'm not entirely a musician. I have done music before. I've produced, but like I take a lot of that production skill mainly for the music, and then I use a lot of like my rule sets that I've built around lyrics based on things I don't like. Basically, they're just like, I don't like this kind of rhyming, so don't do that. And I don't like that kind of rhyming, so don't do that. And then through that, I build this kind of shopping list of how I want my rhymes to actually come out when they're done through this like a specific process that I have.
Wow, super dope. One of the things that you mentioned when you were talking about some of the first people that came to mind of artists you really like is a lot of them have kind of a cohesive, almost experiential presence, right? You talk about Tyler, you talk about Doom, you're talking about people where from the visualization to thematically what they talk about, there's some kind of, you talk about the excitement of getting a booklet and looking through it. It's more experience than just, hey, this is just the song in itself or whatever. So that's interesting, especially in your approach to your artwork. So great question, guys. Definitely appreciated that one. Here's one kind of circling back to, your practice in AI. Do you see a level up for AI right now in the NFT space with a new class of emerging artists being championed from the segment?
Yes, sort of. I think that it's now more than ever easier to make something that looks good. And then that means that there are less and less barriers towards producing something that is palatable and enjoyable. And you're always going to have people who do things just on the surface level with that, but there's going to be more people who have this kind of ability to leverage those tools in a way that creates that experiential, like, or conceptual things that really kind of like tick the boxes. And I think that visual aesthetics become less and less important in art when it's so easy to make them, you know what I mean? And like they're very important in terms of like what they do for evoking feelings and stuff like that. Definitely. Like, I mean, art is still for the most part a visual medium, so it is really important to have your visuals have the feeling that they're supposed to. But I think that it's less and less about uh, technical skill of saying, oh wow, you've made something that looks good, like kudos to you. But if you make something that looks good and has that third meaning to it, you know what I mean? Something that takes beyond its literal, beyond its symbolic, and creates something else, then you're going to see people who manage to do that. They will climb above the people who can't do that. And I think that that's where like limiting, I think that the limiters are being removed by the tools. So yeah, I do agree with that. I think that an emerging class of artists are being championed with that, but I think that we'll still see the same thing as with any other art. I say something pretty controversial on Threads all the time because Threads is just for hot takes. I see it. Like I say that,
I wouldn't
like,
know. I've never gone on there.
shit. No offense to anyone who likes it, but I just have a bad experience there. But like I often go on there and I just say 99.9% of all art created is shit, because the truth is it is. Like what you're seeing, the good art is 1% of the art that's created. You know what I mean? Even if it's like not that good and it's still good, like it's still better than the terrible, furry fan art that's being done on DeviantArt and stuff like that. And no offense if you like that too, but like, not even that has levels too. There's furry art that's done well, and there's furry art that's done shit. Like, people who are like, oh yeah, 99% of AI art shit. I agree with them. 99% of art is shit, and that's
Right.
fine too, because art is not something that's just done for the value of others, for the benefit of others. Art is something that you do generally for yourself, and like, some of us are crazy enough to want to share that with other people, and most people are content with just doing it because they want to do it.
Right. Yeah. No one picked up a coloring book when they were a kid because they thought they'd get $1 each. Although, my little brother
Yeah.
was ambitious at some point. Um, yeah, yeah, and also I think, there's aspects to the art beyond the visualization and beyond the tooling to use it. It's like we had talked about before. It could be the reaction you're trying to get. You're trying to maybe there's a performance tied to how it's related to the market. Like there's so much of it. So I get when there's a conversation when someone there's always a little salt. There's always a little salt on the timeline. I was like, how is this selling for that? I could do this, or
Oh
you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like this is a kid's drawing of a squiggle. Like there's other aspects of it to take into consideration, but by the same token, like creating art is different than commercializing it, right? So someone says, look, you could create anything, right? Like I have a song where I feature Robert Smith. Like I can't put it out, but I love it. It's one of my favorite things I ever did because it's just what I was feeling at the moment. But there's a lot to it in the dynamic you touched on between the crypto art cultural elements and everything else. So Nuke, you are a super dope package. I'm glad we've had this conversation for sure. I got one last one from the community, and I think you'd like to hear this one. So I'll tap you with this one, then I'll let you go because I've kept you way too long. This question says, he talks openly about detachment from sales and not being personally insulted when people sell. Why is Nuke such a rad dude?
I think that, well, I don't know about being a rad dude, but I do know this, that one of the things that is like a core value of being in the crypto art or working with cryptocurrency is freedom to transact. And it's one of the things that really kind of is, to me, exciting about 6529 and that, right? I think that if you buy it and you have the mechanism to be able to sell it, and then you need to sell it or you want to sell it, you can. That's great. Like, I don't see that as a problem. You know what I mean? And like, I see it as a problem only for me personally if you go and wreck my floor. But like, I mean, that's my problem, not yours. You know what I mean? Like, that's for me to deal with, not for you. And so, like, I can't even be mad at you for it. Like, you got to do what you got to do. Like, and the thing is specifically, like, with X figures, I'm still buying them. You know what I mean? I bought 10 of them just before the end of the financial year for us in Australia. It's in the middle of the year, which is bullshit, but whatever. And then I realized, I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to pay tax on all of that. So like, and all of the money that I had spent on it was just going to be, there was a tax implication there. So I was like, you know what? If I give them away as gifts for giveaways to the community and stuff like that, then that will actually absolve some of that tax responsibility. And so I did some tax write-offs and I gave away a bunch of my X figures. So now in the new financial year, I've been buying them back up and trying to build back up my supply because I see this as a long-term project. I'm looking at this with a 20,000 foot view. And like for me, I still love them too. I still look at the collection myself with fondness and go, oh, I love that one. And I just like, I just got someone took one of my wefts yesterday and I got one that I like, and I'm like, that's great. Like, they're fun. They're still fun for me too. And
Yeah.
if I if I end up holding all of them, I don't even have a problem with that too. Because like I love them. Like I'm proud of what I did there. And so yeah, like I think that being able to sell what you buy is a big benefit to crypto art. And I think that there are some people who will shame collectors for selling, even if they need to. And it's like, I don't know, I just can't be fucked being that way. And it's the same, like you said, there's always salt on the timeline when someone wins. Like there's sometimes salt on the timeline when someone loses too, and they're like, oh, I can't believe that they sold out the whole collection and stuff like that. And it's like, sometimes people don't have a choice, like sometimes shit
Right.
happens. And I don't think it's I just don't think it's like me to do that about people selling something if they need to or want to. Like, do what you got to do. I'll
Well,
still be.
it's a great approach. It's clearly resonated with people tuning in and people that are exploring and fans of your work. So that's super dope. What's the best place for people to stay tapped in and explore your work? You know, on your Twitter, you have your Linktree, which
Linktree.
led me to a lot of different resources there, and some that people might not even be familiar with. Right? You can go down the rabbit hole, find some cool stuff on his Instagram for sure that you may not be aware of. And then any final message to collectors or other artists or just Web3 dreamers that are tuning in, checking this out?
Yeah, sure. So for collectors, my message is go collect my work. My message for other artists is like, I mean, it's an interesting thing. Like I really genuinely want to see other people win as much as possible. And, you know, my advice for people is to, you know, it sounds really cliche, but never give up. You know, earlier you showed a body of work from mine, Covenant. That was probably my biggest failure of this year, of like this whole space recently. And it's what pushed me into taking a step back and doing the research and stuff. Because Covenant was embattled by being on the wrong chain, on the wrong platform, and on the wrong at the wrong price. And all of this was because it was kind of like suggested to me to do it that way. And I really should have trusted in my gut and not done it that way. And so when I came out of that experience, I was like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, the way I want to do it. And the thing is, I wanted to do Covenant, but the way I ended up doing it was not ideal for the work and not ideal for it to succeed. Because the thing is, I might say I don't really care about flaws and I don't care about selling out. That is true. But I do care about people seeing the work. And if it's not on a chain or a platform that people are going to have that access to it, then that's a problem. So that's where I think it's important to keep in mind and be realistic about making work accessible for people and putting it to places where they can see it and find it. And you know, if I had to just call it quits and going, well, that was a big fucking failure, I'm just going to quit. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have done X Figures, which is my biggest success. It was like the next thing that I did. And yeah, it was a few months between. It was like a bit of time, but like it ended up being that through failure, I found success. And I think that failure should never be something to stop you from taking a chance or stop you from taking a risk. It's worth taking a risk sometimes to find what's right, but don't make mistakes twice.
Yeah, super dope. And again, thank you so much for spending the time. I know a lot of people are interested in checking this out within our community. I know there's a big appetite externally as well. You've been hitting the circus lately. Circuit, well, not the circus, although that could be applicable.
I actually went to the circus last week, but anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, there you go, hitting the circus lately, and the circuit. You know, telling people about your work. I'm so happy to see a lot of attention coming to it from a lot of the different things that you're doing and it coming together. And super intrigued to continue following and seeing where this progresses. So again, thank you so much, and we'll all be tapped in watching what you do next, my man.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for talking to me for so long. Like, you know, it goes both ways. I could talk forever. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. We'll be sure to check the next drop and we'll stay tapped in. Have a great one.
See ya.